So what do you get when you take two nuclear-armed nations, mix in generous portions of bombast and rhetoric, plus a dash of good old-fashioned name-calling? At some point, your pot may boil over. Remember last week when Donald Trump said this?
We will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself.
Well, Kim Jong-un didn't like that very much, so the man accused of orchestrating his own brother's assassination with a nerve agent and executing others with anti-aircraft guns turned his full attention to the U.S., accusing Trump of, quote, mentally deranged behavior, calling him a dotard and frightened dog, and promising he will pay dearly for the speech. Nevertheless, Trump persisted, taking to Twitter to call Kim a madman who will be tested like never before, adding the next day, if North Korea's foreign minister echoes the thoughts of little rocket man, they won't be around much longer. Yesterday, North Korea's foreign minister said that last tweet constituted a declaration of war, a claim the White House answered with this.
We've not declared war on North Korea, and frankly, the suggestion of that is absurd.
Absurd or not, South Korea says the North is boosting its defenses as it vows to shoot down U.S. bombers that fly too close. Trump's response to that?
We are totally prepared for the second option, not a preferred option. But if we take that option, it will be devastating. I can tell you that, devastating for North Korea. That's called the military option. If we have to take it, we will.
So just how dangerous is this game of nuclear chicken? Joining me are Catherine Moon. She's a political science professor at Wellesley College and non-resident senior fellow at the Brookings Institute. Catherine, it's good to see
Hi.
you. Carol Savitz, senior advisor in MIT's Security Studies program. Hi, Carol. And Jim Walsh, a senior research associate at MIT's Security Studies program and one of the few Americans who've actually traveled to North Korea for nuclear discussions. Jim, it's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Catherine, starting with you, how dangerous is this puerile back and forth between Kim and Trump?
It's pretty bad. I wasn't worried until last week, and now I'm quite worried.
Why are you worried?
Simply because this is an absolutely unusual situation where two leaders who are basically enemies are confronting each other head-to-head, toe-to-toe, even if it's on screen. And North Korea has never had its leaders speak out directly to address the President of the United States.
Using the word I, right. Very unusual.
Taking ownership of what could happen next.
So what should we take away from that, other than the fact that it's rare that it's from him? Should that make us more anxious about
it should
the
make
current
us
mess?
more anxious,
Why?
yes, because he's invested his legitimacy in a public speech using the first-person pronouns to take ownership of whatever happens next. I'm worried about it, and I'm also worried on the other side. A little piece of news that people probably didn't see because it came out on Saturday was that speech that the president read, calling him Rocket Man. And
at the UN,
yes, at the UN. The day before, that speech was vetted by his national security team.
Yes.
Those phrases were not in there.
Right.
And he was warned by the CIA, who has profiled Kim, that he might react if personally attacked. And McMaster told him, if you do this, it will backfire. So it wasn't in the speech. And then he went behind their backs and put it in the speech that he gave.
If Donald Trump were here, he would say it's moments like that that got me elected to the presidency of the United States, despite all those advisors. But, you know, Carol, it seems to me that no sane person who I've read about thinks a military solution is a solution. And does that not include Kim and Trump in your estimation, or no?
It's almost as if they don't understand that they're playing a very dangerous game. At least I see it on the U.S. side. I think that this taunting is part of the Trump persona. I think calling, fellow candidates names and everything else. And I worry that there's no expertise behind what he's saying about the North Koreans. I mean, if he's eschewing advice.
How do you know that it won't work? I'm not, obviously, I'm not at all dismissing what you said. It was his addition. He's not a North Korea expert. He's not a foreign policy expert.
Right.
Why do you agree that it won't work? Why is it dangerous? Maybe he's figured out how to get the Kim and put him in his place.
Because all the conditions for inadvertent escalation are there. All the sides are engaging in bluster and bluffing, so you don't know if your adversary means something when they say something. There is no regular communication between the capitals. During the Cold War, we talked to the Soviets all the time, particularly after the Cuban Missile Crisis, because we learned not having communication could lead to an attack. You're right to say that at the fundamentals, neither side probably wants a war. But you can get war even when neither side wants it if they make mistakes.
Yeah, but Jim, to your point, I mean, it seems to me that the one place where you say, well, maybe what he's trying to do is to basically threaten, cajole, whatever, the Chinese to intervene in a way that would end or de-escalate.
Chinese bought into the UN sanctions, by the way. Did they not?
But much diminished over Russian and Chinese objections. Right. And the one person whom he, of course, is not criticizing is Vladimir Putin. And Russia's sales to North Korea have gone up 73% just this year.
Can you explain, Catherine, two things to me, if you don't mind, because I don't quite get it. I can almost make an argument for anything, but why would you talk about pulling out of a free trade agreement with South Korea, one of your key allies, right at the time that the North Korean threat is as great as it is? And that's exactly what Donald Trump did. Is there a method to that madness, or is it just madness?
There's no method, because Trump has already made it clear to the South Korean president that he does not particularly respect the South Korean president. He called him someone who's in support of appeasement policy toward North Korea, which actually goes down very badly in South Korean domestic politics. And Trump does not realize that all this blustering talk that he does actually has serious consequences in terms of potential danger to real lives on the Korean Peninsula. Americans won't be hurt primarily
because of the proximity.
And
but
also
there are thousands and thousands of American troops there who could also be in harm's way.
That's possible, but in terms of societies, we're talking about threats to Korean lives, Japanese lives, Chinese lives. Oh, there's one thing in particular that I want to go back to your opening question. How bad is this in terms of this war talk and what Trump did at the UN, et cetera? First of all, it is not unrealistic for North Koreans to interpret his talk of destroying the country as a declaration of war. It's never been done in the United Nations, and you don't throw that language around, willy-nilly.
But you don't have to be a PhD to understand that as Trump being Trump. I'm not dismissing the seriousness.
It's Trump as the President of the United States speaking to the state leaders of the world at the United Nations. And Kim Jong-un of North Korea is not just seen as a state leader by its people. He's part of a divinity. So it's as if you knock your president, your pope, your brother all in one. I
won't even ask you why North Korea is now in the travel ban, since no one comes here from that. But to make everybody feel a little better, including at home, we are told, don't worry, the generals will rein all this in. And not a general, but one that works with him, Rex Tillerson, Secretary of State, he said what most people think is the right thing when he was asked if these kinds of comments were helpful. Here's Tillerson.
We're going to continue to pursue our diplomatic efforts and hope that that's the way we'll solve this. Thank you.
That was a representative from the Vatican, by the way. That is what's going on. Well, you said there are no formal talks from the capitals. Every expert, and I use the term loosely, with whom I talk, I don't mean vis-a-vis you. I'm so sorry. Every expert with whom I talk who's not here right now says there are back-channel negotiations, maybe not at the top levels, or back-channel discussions. You've been in discussions through the years with North Koreans. That is happening, isn't it?
Well, it did happen, and that's how Otto Warmbier got released.
Right.
Ambassador Jo Yoon carried on private, unknown they weren't private, but undisclosed negotiations with the North Koreans, even went to Pyongyang, I believe, and helped produce that result. Now, obviously, it was tragic, but he would still be sitting in North Korea if it hadn't been for that negotiation.
Well, that's a good thing. That's a heartening thing.
There were reports today that the North Koreans have been seeking out people allied with the Republican Party to try to get a handle on what Donald Trump is actually doing.
What's he thinking?
What's he thinking and what's he doing? Which is they're nervous.
Exactly. It indicates that they feel like they don't know what he's going to do, and that's kind of dangerous.
Assuming, Catherine, for argument's sake, that every sane person, again, says the only way this can be resolved is with a negotiated settlement, what is the goal? Is the goal a containment policy? I can't imagine a circumstance where Kim Jong-un says, oh, sure, I'll give up my nuclear weapons. Containment is that the goal, or is it not the goal?
So denuclearization is still the U.S. position, but frankly, as an expert, and I think these experts would agree, it's off the table as far as the North Koreans go. It will not happen.
So if
we're going to keep singing that tune, forget it. Negotiations won't happen. if we're talking about a potential freeze with some major security guarantees, some economic benefits, possibly, but you know what? The North Koreans right now are not interested in negotiations.
Right.
We should always be open for dialogue.
Why aren't they interested in negotiations?
Because what they want is what Kim Jong-un called military equilibrium with the United States. He's not deluded into thinking he can match U.S. power, but he wants intercontinental ballistic missiles that are credible to serve as a threat so that the U.S. will lay off him.
Right.
I assume, Carol, that you were
Yeah.
nodding in agreement with what
Yeah.
Catherine said. I assume what Catherine was also going to add is why should this guy ever negotiate with this president of the United States
Right.
when this president of the United States says he may pull out of the agreement that was negotiated with Iran? If you won't
Exactly.
honor that, why would you honor an
Right.
agreement with
I was
North
just,
Korea?
you read my mind. I was just going to say this
I
has
do that too.
What's going on
I
between you
this,
two?
excuse me.
Go ahead.
This has major implications for the Iranians and for other countries down the road who may also be in a position to negotiate with the United States. And it's almost as if they've so compartmentalized these two issues that President Trump doesn't understand the implications. If he pulls out of the Iran deal, why would Kim Jong-un even negotiate with
Okay,
her?
so the
Can I
president
throw
said today
something
he's got
else?
plenty of time on his hands, even though he's watching Fox and Friends. If he's watching tonight, 15 seconds each, give him advice.
You should be talking. You need to hold your friends close and your enemies closer. Agreement or no agreement of a negotiation, at least you're talking. You reduce the risk of mistake and misperception. And normally the North Koreans, in my view, act better when they're in a negotiation.
Carol.
Stop the name calling, pure and simple. This is not helping, and it leads us to this potential escalatory cycle.
Catherine, you finish it
And
off.
look out for the things that are not as closely on the map right now. I worry about North Korea's threat to conduct atmospheric testing.
Yes.
Yes.
And then that's not directly aimed at the United States. What is the U.S. going to do if that happens? Or the electromagnetic pulse. If they detonate a nuclear device in the Earth's atmosphere, it could hurt and destroy electronic communication, satellite, cell phone, etc. That's not a direct attack on the United States or its allies. What is the U.S. going to do? Right.
On that upbeat note, it's good to see you, Catherine. Thank you very
Always.
much. Carol,
Thanks,
pleasure. Jim, thanks so much for your time.
Absolutely.
Thank you all three.